And in regards to the COVID crisis right now, we've just passed the centennial or the 100 mark. We're up to 103 confirmed cases and 3 deaths. So relatively speaking to our 5 neighbors, those counties around us, we're doing extremely well. Obviously unfortunate for those who have confirmed cases and the lives that have been lost, but we feel relatively blessed for the situation we're in today. And I was looking even at down where you're at Berks, you have a population that's 6 or 7 times that of Carbon County, much more dense population. And I can see the numbers are commensurate with that population density that you all have down there in Berks. So we're doing pretty good when it comes to COVID-19. We're definitely taking care of our first responders, to include all the employees here in county government that work for us. Their health and safety has to be number one at these times.
Now, even though the numbers are lower than what we have here in Berks, COVID-19 is still impacting the county from a number of other standpoints. Can you share with us how you folks are doing from a revenue standpoint?
Well, right now, and we're really looking at cash flow when we speak of that. We see revenue, things like our Mock Chunk Lake Park, our county park, our parking revenue. Those unquestionably are down and will continue to stay down for the foreseeable future. But like in most counties in Pennsylvania right now, this is the month when tax revenue starts coming in. And each county holds over a certain amount of money from the previous year to kind of bridge the gap between January 1st and April where that tax revenue starts coming in. So our concern as we're looking at our numbers here in April is the tax revenue going to stay on track the previous years? If not, we're going to have significant complications in the coming months. But I am happy to say, Bill, our first look of it about 10 days ago, it appeared as our tax revenue for at least the first half of the month of April was going to be close to what we saw in previous years. And that's primarily from the fact that most individuals with a mortgage have it through a financial institution, which, of course, have an escrow account. And so those banks are always trying to, pay during the discount period. So those first 60 days where we offer a 2% discount. But nonetheless, it is a consideration, it is a concern, and we're looking at it every couple days. We're looking at our numbers here.
Now, there are some counties that are postponing the property tax bill that's due by the end of the month. How about up in Carbon County? Are you folks postponing the deadline for submitting the property taxes up there as well or not?
Well, Bill, you may not know, but just yesterday, the bill, if I recall, the Senate Bill 841 went to the governors or will go to the governors for signature today. That's going to give Carbon County and all the other counties the opportunity to extend their discount period and the penalty period for taxes. So now that is almost law, it's going to give Carbon County the opportunity to seriously examine if we can modify the existing terms of our tax payment. And we're going to give that serious consideration starting today. We're just waiting for that Senate bill, House bill to be reconciled and sent to the governor. And it should be on his desk this morning, and we expect him to sign that quite rapidly.
And can you give us some specifics about that bill as to what dates they have in that bill for as revisions of what we would normally do instead of April 30th? What are the dates that their bill indicates?
Okay, so what that specific bill, and I'm pulling up the details right here because I had a really good post on that last night. So importantly, it's going to affirm that the local governments, have the authority to extend the discount period for property tax collection all the way through August 31st. Now, that discount period normally ends in 60 days. It would have been the end of May. So we're extending it those additional months to 31 August. That's a discount period. Carbon County, it's a 2% discount. And then to waive all penalties for late payment of taxes through December 31st. That's basically given the counties the opportunity to eliminate the penalty period, which up here in Carbon County, that would be a 10% penalty commencing on 1 August for those who had not previously paid during the discount or the face period for taxes.
And if it does pass, any thoughts as to where the commissioners at Carbon County, are leaning?
Yeah, unquestionably, we're leaning to ensuring that all the citizens here in Carbon County will be able to meet their tax obligations. And I would definitely push for a more relaxed approach and take advantage of the authority that will be given us by the governor in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
And right now, as far as the county's budget is concerned and the reserves, how are you folks doing financially?
We're doing pretty well. Again, we did, though, as you know, we had a notable furlough here in Carbon County. I think we're probably one of the first counties to really move forward with a furlough. 97 individuals were furloughed in the county, and 3 factors, including the one you just mentioned, weighed into that. You know, first and foremost, we're concerned about the safety, the health and welfare of our staff, wanted to get more spatial separation or social distancing for them and allow them to, quote unquote, stay at home and minimize contact or potential transmission of coronavirus. We're also ensuring that the workload was sufficient to the hours those individuals were given, because, again, we have a responsibility to the taxpayer. If we're going to pay people, there has to be work for them. And weighing heavily also was the fact that we had to be conscientious of the fiscal responsibility and anticipating a loss of revenue or a slowdown in the cash flow. And that resulted in one portion of the consideration to furlough 97 individuals here in the county.
Any repercussions to the service levels as a result of those furloughs?
No, Bill. Services have continued uninterrupted. Might be a little bit slower than normal, but understand there was contraction at the federal, the state level. The economy, of course, contracted. So a lot of the day-to-day transactions were necessarily or obviously slowing down at higher levels. That was putting less stress on our service provisions. Now, we had gone quite rapidly to emphasizing online transactions, telephonic, and email, and then by appointments only. While all of our offices remain open, we continue to emphasize, again, the email, the online, and phone calls, and as a last resort, to go ahead and make an appointment and come in. But we've seen very little traffic, at least under the departments that the county commissioners ourselves administer. Now, the courts continue to go, reduced, no doubt, but the courts continue to operate and function also, as do, the row officers or row offices that support county government and the courts.
All right, so we're talking with Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, and we invite your calls today for questions for the commissioner. Those numbers are 610-374-8800, toll-free, 888-401-0459. We're going to take our first commercial break here, and we'll return in just a minute. Here on Feedback. Good morning, everyone. Bill Saunders, along with Lisa Dela Cruz, keeping you company as we're subbing for the vacationing Mighty Mike Faust this week. And if you have a question that you would like to ask our guest right now, Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz from Carbon County, give us a call at 610-374-8800 or toll free 888-401-0459 is that number. And Chris, it looks like we do have one caller here who would like to ask you a question. We've got John in Reading who has a question. John, good morning.
Good morning. I'm curious as to the situation of the face masks in his county.
Well, John, so much for your call and question in regards to the face masks here up in Carbon County. Now, as I'm running around the grocery stores, my fellow commissioners, actually we see a pretty good participation rate. However, it still does seem that, some individuals might be a little self-conscious, a little ashamed, a little embarrassed, maybe a little bit too much pride in not wearing those face masks. So when it comes to the general population, while we're doing okay, I can't say we're necessarily doing great. And I would like people to, again, not simply consider themselves, but when they don't wear those masks, what it might mean for others. And importantly, those who they love and care for. So we want to highly emphasize the importance of covering up. And we do have a public service ad that we put out both on LED digital billboards and on our social media pages. It says, "Cover up carbon, masks on." And I sent you a copy of that public service ad, and that's really trying to emphasize the importance of the guidance that both the governor and the president and the CDC has put out to put the masks on. Now, when it comes to our first responders, we're actually doing quite well, and we have no unfulfilled requests from our fire, police, or emergency medical personnel. We've issued as of April 14th, just under 5,000 masks that we have issued out. We're also providing them to our corrections officers, our caseworkers, for example, Area Agency on Aging, Children and Youth Services, Adult and Juvenile Probation. So currently, right now, we feel we're in pretty good position, but again, we're not going to let our guard down, and we're going to continue to push and emphasize, cover up carbon, masks on, John.
John, did you have any other question for the commissioner?
Yes. I'm concerned with the availability, of the face masks and quantity. For instance, in Reading, it seems to be hard to get a hold of one. Why isn't there an emphasis on having industry make more face masks for the population? Now, for the people involved in food and the grocery stores, yes, there seems to be an availability, but for the general population, there doesn't seem to be. It should be an emphasis on the manufacture of these masks for the general population, and not just those industries that need to have them.
No, John, unquestionably, we need, at this time in the pandemic, we need universal mask wearing. Now, different degrees of protection for different individuals. Those who are regularly in contact with individuals who are higher risk, no doubt, the N95. And then the lesser masks for others, such as the general population. And I do believe our government, both at the federal and state level, is making a concerted effort to ramp up and create initiatives for private industry to meet the need, which of course is lagging. In the meantime, though, as we wait for manufacturing to spin up, we can't simply not mask up. Therefore, improvisation, improvise. There's a lot of tutoring videos on the internet that shows how to, use a bandana to be a mask. So, we have to help fill the gap until manufacturing can meet the incredible demand that has been created by this pandemic. But I agree, we need universal wearing, and we need the manufacturing plants to step up. I think, John, I was thinking the other day about Jim Thorpe in Carbon County. Back in the 60s and 70s, there were 4 sewing shops, silk mills, dressmakers, factories in every little town around here. what a great asset they would be today, because they could quickly spin on a dime and manufacture the masks that are needed. But unfortunately, we sent a significant portion of our manufacturing overseas, and we're paying the price for that today. Thank you, John.
Yes, it's nice, but they should still really step up on the creation of the production of them and not just talk about it.
I agree, John. I think you look at the statistics, the numbers are getting better. They're not good enough. We got to push, and ensure we have universal mask wearing, universal mask availability for all residents in the Commonwealth.
All right, John, thank you so much for your question today and for listening this morning to Feedback here on WEEU. And as we continue with our conversation this morning with Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. Chris, a couple of counties in the state, primarily Allegheny, Philadelphia, Montgomery, and Chester counties, are requesting that Governor Wolf allow for mail-in voting, mail-in ballots for the June 2nd primary as a result of the pandemic. Anything, is Carbon County looking to join in on that effort?
Well, again, I think what you might be referring to is simply mail-in voting. You know, the state has recently adopted a new law that allows mail-in voting. So citizens should take advantage of that opportunity to use a mail ballot. You have both, you can do an absentee ballot or you can do a mail-in ballot. More or less, they serve the same purpose. Allow you to vote without having to go physically to the polls. I think mail-in ballots at this time are necessary as we approach the 2 June. I don't think, though, that we should simply allow mail-in ballots or restrict it to mail-in ballots only. I do think consolidating voting places, ensuring that our poll workers have the necessary personnel protective equipment to safely work the polls and to assist the voters is critical in this, though. And I do have concerns about potential for voter fraud or undue influencing in the mail-in ballots. Although, overall, I support the use of mail-in ballots. I'm hoping that'll get the participation rate up a little bit higher than it has been in the past. Normally, we're in the low 20% of participation rates. I'd like to see a higher rate. And if mail-in ballots are a part to get those numbers a little bit higher, and they do offer a sense of security for people, mostly our most vulnerable population, our seniors and those with underlying health conditions, you know, I would emphasize to them that that's a great option for them, and they should take advantage of it. Don't want to place anyone in danger needlessly.
Chris, you've been getting some pushback. One person in particular sent a letter to the editor to the Times newspaper up there in regard to your request for the state to release to you, or to the county, I should say, the locations of COVID-19 cases. Can you elaborate on what your request was there?
Yeah, our request, I was spearheading an effort for the Pennsylvania Department of Health to release the geodata, right? So the addresses of confirmed cases of COVID-19 out of concern that Carbon County was sending its first responders into potentially high viral hazard environments without full situational awareness of the threat. Unquestionably, we want all first responders to act as if every case is a COVID-19. But as John previously mentioned, we do have constraints in resources. So we don't want to indiscriminately use masks, gloves, gowns, face shields that are maybe in short supply or limited supply. So by having that information available for our first responders when they are dispatched, we can better ensure that they are taking all appropriate measures to safeguard them from exposure of COVID-19. Now, our challenge was that for whatever reason, the Pennsylvania Department of Health was not adhering to the guidance authorized or provided by Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights, that clearly stated that this information could be released for emergency responder or emergency management purposes. Now, fortunately, we were just notified on Friday that Dr. Levin will be releasing that data to the counties. We do have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that we won't use it but for that specific purpose, and we are going to move forward to that. We had over 1,700 first responders that may have been needlessly exposed, unbeknownst to them, to a COVID-19 environment while, there was dilly-dallying going on in Harrisburg, quite frankly.
And the person who sent this letter to the editor voiced the concern that if that information is released, that it could result in retaliation, social shunning, and possible violence. How do you respond to that?
Well, first and foremost, the request was specific. Again, it was for emergency management purposes. Is there the potential that there might be a leak that of some individual in a specific address? Yes, but that's risk-informed decision-making. It's a calculated risk that we have to take to protect the majority of citizens, residents, and first responders in Carbon County. I don't think people are going to be socially shunned out of concern that someone has COVID-19. Are you going to keep your distance and ensure that they've been quarantined for 14 days and recovered? Absolutely. But the gentleman was trying to draw comparisons to the HIV/AIDS crisis, primarily in the 80s and 90s. And I thought that was not a good comparison. I don't see violence against individuals who have COVID-19. And quite frankly, I've seen no reports of any violence perpetrated against individuals who have COVID-19. So I thought that was a bit off the mark, Bill.
Okay. And we're speaking this morning with Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. We invite your calls, 610-374-8800 or toll-free, 888-401-0459 are the numbers. We'd love to get calls from up there in the Carbon County area this morning. This is your opportunity to talk to one of your commissioners this morning with your questions, and we will return with the commissioner in just a moment here on Feedback on WEEU and WBYM. And 1160 AM WBYN, as well as online at 830 WEEU.com. We're talking with Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz this morning. And Chris, the Governor Wolf just recently announced that he's going to furlough prisoners who are most at risk of contracting COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think there has to be, and I use this term a lot, risk-informed decision-making. If there are individuals who are very close to the end of serving their sentence, paying their debt to society, they are very vulnerable to COVID-19. I think each case should be looked at on an individual basis. Carbon County, my most notable concern within the county for the potential for COVID-19, a significant outbreak, was in our county prison. So I can at least understand the thinking, the logic behind the governor's desire to do this. Here in Carbon County, we have suspended weekend sentences because we do have some individuals who would simply come in and serve on the weekends. We suspended weekend sentences. That'll pick up, after the crisis. We've suspended visitation. We've suspended work release and our volunteer programs. And we have done very limited reductions of the inmate population. For those who will absolutely, or I can't say absolutely, who will not pose a risk to society based upon what they may be in the county prison for. So that has helped us to control or mitigate against COVID-19 in our prison, because it will be a petri dish, or is a petri dish, should just one inmate or a couple contract COVID-19. So I can see the logic behind it, but it has to be considered well and weighed against the risk to the population for these individuals.
And how has the situation been for nursing homes up in Carbon County?
In Carbon County itself, I'll be honest, Bill, because of the lack of release of information from the Department of Health, I can't formally say how that situation has been in regards to the number of cases in the long-term facilities in Carbon County. So again, we see another secondary or tertiary effect of failure to provide that information to the county of Carbon. Nonetheless, we did have our emergency management coordinator canvass all the facilities, long-term facilities, to check their status and how they were doing, to include where they stood when it comes to masks, gloves, gowns, and face shields. And through our coordination with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, all of our long-term facilities, the major ones, have been provided that PPE that is required. And I was just looking at our Excel spreadsheet last night for those facilities, and we do not have one outstanding request for PPE from our long-term facilities, from our St. Luke's or Lehigh Valley facilities in Carbon County, or from our first responders.
Have you gotten any response from, and I assume your request for information on where the COVID-19 cases are in Carbon County, I assume that request went off to the Department of Health, the State Department of Health?
That's correct. And on Friday, we did get a letter, a correspondence from Dr. Levine that went out really to all the counties saying that they will be releasing certain information in regards to those cases, addresses and such, for use for emergency management services. And we are in the process of signing a non-disclosure agreement with the state's Department of Health so that they will release that. And I suspect, by the end of the week, hopefully sooner, that information will be going into our emergency management database so we can forewarn our first responders of a heightened risk as they move towards, providing a critical service at this time.
We're talking to Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz this morning. If you have a question for the commissioner, give us a call here, 610-374-8800, or toll free, 888-401-0459 are the numbers. We welcome calls, particularly from our WBYN listening area. So please do give us a call this morning if you have a question for the commissioner. And I have one more question for you regarding the governor. And down here in Berks County, a number of our small business owners have voiced concern about the way that the state government has handled the essential businesses versus the non-essential business labeling. Have you had any calls from small businesses up there in Carbon County and their concerns as to whether they should have been labeled as essential or should have been allowed to stay open?
Yeah, one specific case I'll mention, and it is very local here. It was a home inspector who requested an exception policy so that he could continue to operate. His argument, a case to the state, was he inspects homes independently without the requirement or without physical presence of other individuals. So he's able to maintain notable social distancing for his work. And that was the one major example that we have seen here in Carbon County. And he was denied the ability to continue inspecting homes. Now, that forced that individual to have to apply to the Paycheck Protection Program, which is, a federal program from the Small Business Administration, being really organized at the local level by our banks here in Carbon County. And fortunately, he was successful in getting what is currently a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program, but will turn into a grant if he meets the requirements. I would say, Bill, interesting enough, I know, some people enjoy their beer, some people enjoy their liquor. It's interesting to see that beer distributors, which are private, are open, and the liquor stores were not open. Understand they are, a state liquor control board certified and run operation. But I recall the big argument about 2 or 3 years ago about privatizing the state stores. Now, and individuals around here can be a bit sarcastic from time to time, and smart alecky we can be. And they thought, well, if we would have privatized our state liquor stores, both those who imbibe in beer and stronger spirits would have had the opportunities to sustain themselves through this pandemic.
Do you have any thoughts on how the governor handled that list of noting which industries or which businesses are essential and which ones are not? Do you think that was handled properly?
I suspect there were different interest groups that influenced that list, rightly or wrongly. I'm sure there are some essential services that are non-essential, and vice versa. You can please some of the people some of the time, most of the people most of the time, but you're not going to please all the people all the time. Again, that goes back, I think, to the basic concept of how we deal with the particular threat in this environment, be it Pennsylvania, be it in Carbon County. Each country is handling it differently to varying degrees of success. I have to give them credit for being proactive, moving forward aggressively, and quite frankly, showing, I think, good leadership. Doesn't mean I don't question some of his decisions, but I'm grateful that the governor is out there making decisions in a decisive manner. That's what we need at this time.
And we are talking with Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. We have just a few moments left with him this morning. We're going to take a brief break here, Chris, and we'll return with some more questions for you in just a bit here on Feedback on WEEU and WBYN and online at 8:30, WEEU.com. Good morning, everyone. Bill Saunders and Lisa Dela Cruz keeping you company on this Wednesday's edition of Feedback. We're in for the vacationing Mighty Mike Faust, who will be returning on Monday. And right now we have on the line with us Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz, who's with us for the rest of this hour. Taking your questions. If you do have a question for the commissioner, give us a call at 610-374-8800 or toll free 888-401-0459. Chris, we're in the process now of determining when we can go back to quote-unquote normal. And you've got Governor Wolf, who is working in tandem with governors in surrounding states. He's going at it from one standpoint, while the General Assembly seems to be going in a different direction. What are your thoughts on when we should go back to some sort of normalcy?
Well, Bill, right now there's no question we're going to see a new normal. What does normal look like? Not necessarily post-pandemic, but also transition as we get on the other side of the bell curve. While I think it's very astute to begin planning for transition, I don't see we're ready to act on any type of transition right now. So I do want to see them leaning forward in the saddle and developing those plans, bringing in the economic, the political, the medical experts to start discussing that and how we should start opening up our businesses, our commerce. Tourism is incredibly important to Carbon County, and the epicenter is right here in the county seat, Jim Thorpe, and we have been devastated and will continue to be, I suspect, through the summer. I don't see myself large gatherings taking place for many months. I think that would be an unnecessary risk. You know, the festivals that we are so accustomed to in Pennsylvania every summer, you know, almost every other weekend there's a festival. I just can't imagine that we will get to that point this summer. Hoping by fall, mostly around here where the fall foliage is such an important season for commerce and activities here. But I do believe we need to begin the planning, and when with the indicators demonstrate that the risk has been reduced and that we can safely start opening up the businesses again, we need to do it. I prefer to lean a little bit forward and get them open sooner than later, but again, it's all about looking at the risk. And it's likewise bringing back our county employees. I want them back as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe, the workload is there, and it's fiscally responsible to do. And again, as we get the rest of the economy going, our workload will go up in the county unquestionably. So it's all connected. So I want to lean forward in good planning and ready to execute when it's time to go.
And Commissioner, we have less than a minute left here in this hour of the program. Real quick, who do you think should be making the decision as to whether or not we should go back to some sense of normalcy? Is that a state and local decision, or do you think that that's a decision that should be left to the federal government?
No, I believe it has to be synchronized and coordinated from the federal, state, county, and other municipality levels. It can't be one or the other. It has to be synchronized and coordinated through all levels of government. I think otherwise we're going to have significant information gaps, inconsistencies that are going to continue to keep residents of the United States at risk. So we definitely have to synchronize and coordinate it at all levels.
Chris, thank you so much for spending the time with us this morning. We truly appreciated having your own feedback, and we hope we can do that again.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill. And let me emphasize, cover your face, cover your cough, mask on, gloves on when you're out running around, Bill.
Good advice. Thank you again, Commissioner Lukasiewicz. We appreciated your time this morning.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.